got the
You can't
nerve
say
to
that on
say something.
Facebook, can you?
What
Can't
up?
say
What up?
the
What up?
T-word.
We live. Back at you again. This is gonna be a really gonna be a really good episode. Let's tag some people. Let's get in here and tag some people. Thanks for joining us. You could be anywhere in the world, but you choose literally anywhere in the world on the internet, but you chose to be here with us tonight. See, talk things that make your seeds walk. Bobby, Trisha, Precious, and I'll do my regular traditional pick on Bobby for obvious reasons. Thank you for not wearing the tank top. Do this for a couple more weeks to create that kind of tank top drought, and then we'll be thirsty for more later, possibly. Possibly. But anyways, let's tag some people, get them in the room, because I really wanted to talk about this King Richard movie. Now, I want to be a responsible journalist. I don't want to talk about it too much in detail and specifics with the movie because I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to watch it tonight. But let me clarify. What I do want to do is I want to talk about the premise that a lot of Black fathers have been accused of, them being sexist, them being abusive, them being using toxic masculinity and patriarchy to run their households and whatnot. And so I just wanted to ask the question, is it responsible to celebrate abusive parents who raise successful children and adults? I seen the same thing with like Joe Jackson. We saw the same thing with Floyd Mayweather's father. We saw the same thing with what's the one brothers, man, you know what I'm saying, who played ball, LeVar Ball. A lot of people was on his head, and of course I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that these parents say and they do in their parenting skills. However, at the same time, I'm not trying to raise the type of children that they're trying to raise. They are trying to raise extraordinary children to not only survive in their social economic conditions, but also make a lot of money so they can have generational wealth. And that wasn't necessarily my goal. I wanted to raise just, really good, informed, citizens, I'm saying, just good people. A generational wealth, yeah, of course. I mean, I think you'll be, a little bit strapped not to find a Black person who would want that for their children. But I just wanted to get y'all feedback, and people out there, I want y'all to get in the comments and stuff. Please comment and share this. I want to know, what do y'all think? Is it responsible to celebrate abusive parents who raise successful children, specifically Black parents, knowing the conditions that they have to grow up in and whatnot? I mean, is that responsible? Is that cool to do? Because there's a lot of problems with some of those parenting skills, a lot of problems. And when we talk about adverse childhood experiences, we talk about ACEs and things that lead to trauma, that leads to stress, that leads to things that impede children's learning, that leads to young people being introduced into the prison industrial complex. A lot of these parenting styles, you know what I'm saying, contribute to very toxic behavior. So I just want us to be balanced in this. And before we be like, oh man, stop just criticizing and demonizing Black parents, I want to also remind you, like, a lot of these strategies specifically that Black men do on a different topic, you will be like, man, that's toxic masculinity. You know what I'm saying? So we got to have a balanced commentary and response and unpacking of this. So, I mean, what y'all think? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Trisha, Precious, someone jump in first. What you think, Bobby?
I'm probably never going to be a fan of using 2020 and 2021 vocabulary buzzwords to evaluate the parenting style of someone that successfully raised two of the greatest athletes, male or female, also that happens to be Black of all time, who have been successful in business, successful in sport, have basically done nothing to publicly embarrass their family. These two women have been outstanding representatives of the community. So I have the hardest time saying anything negative about the way that they got there, especially when they're endorsing the version of events by executive producing the film and putting their signature saying, yeah, we're willing to give our father credit for his role in our success. I won't tarnish that in any way. That's not something I'm interested in doing. And it's probably because I had a father in my life who absolutely expected me to be not just average, but was pushing me to be everything that he thought I could be, regardless of whether that meant I was going to be a doctor or a rocket scientist or an athlete. It was, you're going to be great because we're going to push you. So I personally can't imagine that as being negative, even though I understand the pressure that it brings. I don't know that that pressure is a negative. And just because in 2021 we are so focused on mental health and how a little bit of pressure might make somebody crack, I'm not willing to then say, well, because he might have cracked them when they didn't crack, that it was a bad thing. I won't do it.
What you think, Trish? I saw you nodding your head in agreement a couple times. You always got something very thoughtful to add on.
I completely agree with what Bobby is saying. I think it's very easy for us in 2021 to look in hindsight and say that a parent did something incorrectly. Why they're specifically, I guess, honoring him in this film is he was instrumental in their development as tennis players. They became tennis players. They earned a living as tennis players. And I think going back into that time, most people, like today, you don't realize how difficult it was for them as two Black children to become tennis players. And as I said, I'm a little biased because I did take classes with Mr. Williams when I was younger, but I couldn't hack it. They could. So we should respect and honor Black parents that are able to develop their children to become successful in something. And it feels like whenever we have a Black person that becomes successful because of their parental guidance or intervention, we somehow have to demonize that. And I don't see that happening as much with non-Black celebrities or people that become the best in their field. I mean, if we're going to look at him, like McEnroe's father was also pretty involved in McEnroe's development, and he turned out to be an a-hole when he was on the court. You never saw any of that from Serena and Venus, and yet they were provoked more. He was, I don't want to say a stage, like a sports father. So why is it that we feel the need to analyze and demonize Black parents, particularly Black fathers and mothers, but Black fathers, the minute that someone is giving them praise? And like you said, his two daughters were the executive producers. So,
right.
Yeah.
But there's a thin line between demonizing and criticizing and pushing back on some of those tactics, right? So, like, you feel me? If they didn't turn out to be good athletes and millionaires, and we have to also understand, let's be fair, that the metric system is that they turned out to be some of the greatest athletes ever. Like, that's part of the metric system, that what he did was good. However, if they did not turn out to be great athletes and became jerks, would we be celebrating that? If they turned out different, I don't think that we would be celebrating that. We will be pushing the same narrative of toxic masculinity and unhealthy patriarchy.
I would push back on that only because Mr. Williams also taught other Black kids, of which I was one of them. He taught other Black kids tennis. Granted, I did not become a tennis player, and I didn't like some of the things he used to tell me about. His obsession was he didn't want me to hit a two-handed backhand anymore because he was like, you're hitting like a little girl. You can do a one-arm backhand. I refused to do it. So at a certain point, my parents were like, we're not wasting money for you to go there and sit there arguing with him that you're not going to listen to him. What it did teach me, even though I didn't become a professional tennis player, was that anything that men could do, that I could try to do, that I was holding myself back here. So it's not also about, what he did for his daughters. He did a lot for Black children that were taking classes from him at Rancho Cienega Park in LA. So, we it's we should be praising Black men that are doing things like that, not only for his daughters to make them the greatest, but also he was doing things for the community as well.
And I push back too, because I think that tennis is not the only thing that they would have been great at. I think that they would have been great at anything that they pursued, because great coaches teach their athletes how to be great in life. That's literally what coaching is about. You can get any coach and ask them what their number one responsibility is, and they'll say it's to make my athletes better people. And if they don't say that, they're not a good coach.
Right.
Point blank, period. So
yeah,
if you're
at the AAU level, and I will definitely say that was not the goal, you know what I'm saying, of a lot of coaches. And that was always my premise and my metric system is youth development. And a lot of people would have a problem with me when I would play certain players who weren't as good. I said, man, it feels good to win. And I know that has a lot to do with a person's self-efficacy and their self-esteem and their youth development. But when we focus on that, running up the score on other kids, and that's not what I was looking for. You know what I mean? And I knew that wasn't the best part. What you think?
They've been great.
Go ahead.
Who talking? Well, you, Bobby? I know you like to say something. But anyway, I agree with what both Trisha and what Bobby said. And it brings me up that little saying, what the thing is called, pressure make diamonds. Because if he didn't do if King Richard, I'm calling him King Richard, but anyway, if Mr. Richard did not push them girls, do you think they probably would still? Do you think they even would be as great as they are? I don't think everything.
They might have died.
Huh?
They might have died. Their sister was murdered.
Yes, she was. She was murdered. That's facts. Yes.
She might have ended up like their sister.
Yes. And that's why I was saying that when you especially for Black people, when you in a world where there's not much opportunity for you because you don't have the privilege, that makes you want to step out the box and say, no, we're going to do whatever we need to do by any means necessary. And sometimes that comes with what we like I said, what Trish said is correct. We tend to demonize how Black people parent their children. But my thing is this, if he wasn't going to do it, the world and society was going to do when they step out. So he had to prep them for because look how they treated today, especially Serena. Just imagine that Richard didn't do his job. Just imagine he didn't make her step out that line to put whatever kind of remarks that society or the news reporter does against her. She probably would have cracked a long time ago. She would have never made it this far.
Okay, and I agree with everything y'all saying. And to add on to what you're saying is I want to push back a little bit because I've been a coach for several years and I've been an athlete for years too. I wasn't able to play at the level of Tank Top Bob though, at the D1 level. Give it up for Tank Top Bob. Oh man, I can't even give you a compliment without throwing a little bit of comedic shade. But no, but really, I've been around other coaches, right? And so you feel me? So what would be your response when you see a coach doing some things that you would seem a little extreme, abusive, you know what I mean? Pushing your child or someone else's child to the limit. And then they reference a King Richard. They reference a Mayweather. They reference a Joe Jackson. Like, I'm just taking a page out of their playbook. This is how you create extraordinary athletes and people like the Serena sisters, like, you know what I'm saying, Floyd Mayweather, which is, on this same trajectory, in the same line, that same type of coaching and that intensity created a Floyd Mayweather also. You know what I'm saying? It also created a Michael Jackson. It created a Mike Tyson whose narratives and life stories isn't as acceptable as a Serena and Venus. So if you get a person who is exhibiting these intense, extreme coaching styles, and then you say, hey, man, hey, chill with that. That's not cool. You know what I'm saying? And they be like, hey, this is what King Richard does, though. This is what he did to create people. And it's like, what's your response then?
Everybody is not capable of handling that type. Some people just can't. It's everybody's not built for that type of pressure.
Exactly.
Some people can handle it, some people cannot. And chances are, if they couldn't handle the pressure, they would have been successful regardless how much that coach pushed them. If anything, they're just going to drop out and they're going to do whatever they choose to do.
So them not being able to take abusive, extreme, intense behavior becomes like a qualifier and disqualifier. You know what I'm saying? If they get the development to be successful, that doesn't sound fair as a parent. Like, let me give you an example. I was in the stands and my son was playing basketball. I think my son may have been in 5th or 6th grade. And this was doesn't matter the race. Sure, I'll put it in there. It was a white coach and it was a white kid. And my son was on the team and it was AAU. It gets intense. And I seen it in the stand, this dude, the coach, grabbed this white player by his jersey on my son's team and shook him and was like yelling at him in his face. Man, I was livid. I was hot. So I just sat there and wait for the game to end. So when we went back in the locker rooms, when we were walking to the locker room, I approached him. I said, hey, man, Mike, Coach Mike, hey, real talk, bro, that was out of pocket. And I tell you what, man, if you do that to my son, there's going to be a problem. Whatever you do to my son, I'm going to do to you. And then so he's, got an attitude. Well, you got a problem with that, this, that, and the third, and I was like, that could have been a moment where he was like, man, I was just pushing him to be his best, or, you know what I'm saying? He could have flew back and say, this is how, you build great human beings and to be resilient and whatnot. And I was just like, I wasn't having it. I think as a coach, and I know as a coach and as a teacher, you have to differentiate your instruction. And if you have a one size fits all, and the one size you got that is supposed to fit all, or you all need to just go ahead and, hit the door, is extreme, and intense and sometimes abusive, I have a problem with that. So I understand why people say he is reinforcing, sexist behaviors. And I also understand and abusive behaviors, just like I understand it when, Michael Jackson said it about Joe Jackson. I understood it when, what's his name? Pardon self. Roy Jones said, his dad used to tie his dominant hand behind his back and make him fight, people 3 or 4 years older than him. But he's a millionaire. He's an extraordinary athlete. And from what I know, a pretty good person. I don't know. I've never dated him. I've never married him. I don't know him personally. But that's not acceptable, though. Tying a child's dominant hand behind their back and having them fight people 3 or 4 years older than them. I don't think that's cool, y'all. I don't. And I don't think that is easily reduced to, hey, man, he's just a black parent trying to raise a child, to be an extraordinary person. That's pretty reductive.
But we do this in everything with kids. I can even harken back. Like, my mother was born right-handed, but was left-handed, but was forced to do everything right-handed because they thought they were helping her to be successful as an adult because the world is right-handed. But, she reverted back to being left-handed, but she was forced to do things like that. I've had, when I've taught many years, as well as participated in honors programs, I've seen kids screaming about grades, parents screaming at the kids, teachers screaming at kids when they, made lower than an A on something, or when they're taking the AP test, if they came back with the reports and they didn't get 5s and 4s, that they were upset. So they were pushing parents, dragging their kids to make sure that they're enrolled in 5 to 6 AP classes. That's also like high stakes stress, the same to be successful, the same sort of high stakes stress with, sports and everything. So we do this to kids regardless if we're preparing them to be professionals in sports or to do well in school. So that same pressure is everywhere, but we tend to focus on what we're doing in terms of like sports and entertainment to develop kids and ignore what we're doing to them in schools in terms of academics.
I agree with that. And
Yeah.
and this is the reason why I say that. Feel me? Is because as a principal, as an educator, you know what I'm saying, for so many years at so many different levels, when I embrace that philosophy, specifically with a focus on Black and brown children who I know make up the performance gap and have unique deficiencies because of a system that is not made to meet their needs. So when I focus on them, a couple of things happen. Number one, are you just saying it's because I'm Black? Why are you always taking this out on the Black kids? What's your problem? You're supposed to be pro-Black, but why are you doing this to the Black kids? Oh, I'm just trying to prepare them for a life to be competitive post-secondary, education. You know what I'm saying? But you're just too hard on the Black kids. Okay, I'm just holding them accountable. You know what I mean? Or I'll get parents that will be like, you're just too hard on them. Give them a break. And then my argument is, well, their life outside of this high school is not going to give them a break. We literally have students who have IEPs, who are in special education, who literally go and make very, very poor choices at public venues. Let's just say at a restaurant. They're just, doing stuff where people just feel inspired to call the police. True story. Police come. You know what this young man told them? Y'all can't do nothing to me. I have an IEP. I'm in special ed. I have accommodations. Police was like, you don't give about no accommodations. You need to act right. And it was a good thing that the community stood up, because there was an actual paraeducator that was in that restaurant at that time and said, let me talk to this young man. This is Stevie. This is little Stevie. You know what I mean? Let me talk to him. But that's a perfect example of his parents enabled him while he was in school to inspire him, quote unquote, make him believe that people were going to give him breaks that a school did. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, people are ready to lawyer up. Trisha, I'm sure you know about this, being an administrator. You know what I'm saying? People are ready to lawyer up. If you give your child, if their child after school study session or detention based on their attendance, and they are just straight up incorrect, people have a problem with that. And it's like, that's why I'm so confused. And that's what makes it such a nuanced experience when we talk about celebrating King Richard. We celebrate, Mayweather. I'm all for it, but people are not going to allow us to do that for the most important reasons, because a lot of people can't pull it off. They can't pull it off in a healthy way where they're getting a byproduct and their results actually legitimize their strategies, if that makes sense. You see what I'm saying? Like, the end result doesn't always legitimize a person using those type of strategies. It just doesn't. And even with like King Richard, you know what I'm saying? I agree with his strategies, by the way. I'll go ahead and let the cat out the bag, but that doesn't mean that he's not free from criticism. I would like to know what his success rate was. I would like to know how many people came out of his academy that were good, informed, you know what I'm saying, citizens and human beings outside of being millionaires and being extraordinary athletes like his daughters. I would be willing to bet that the percentage is pretty high, but I don't know. I don't know. And just because his percentage is high doesn't mean it justifies someone using similar, if not more extreme tactics. And you know what I'm saying? Getting an end result that is not as extraordinary.
And this is the part what I'll say. I'll have to ask, how do the people who experience his tactics feels? Like, how do they receive that particular tactic when it happened, and what they feel about it now looking back at it? Because I know Joe. I know we're talking about Richard, but with the Jackson's family, at first, yeah, they probably did not. They say they did not like how Joe Jackson did run, how he did things, but they ultimately did forgive him, because without his rigorous tactics, they say they would not be who they are today. They would not be successful as that. So you have to, while we may not like what he did from our outside, the person I'm really more concerned about is the person who was their student, which in this case normally be their children. And you also got to think about there's children who live to make their parents happy or make them proud. So if that means taking on those sort of tactics, or quote unquote abusive tactics, to not only make a better life for themselves, but also to make their parents proud, many children would do it. It also makes me wonder, doing that, do those parents show their children love and support when they're not in training?
That's what I wanted to get on. We haven't touched on that. Thank you, Precious. That's a man. That is so important. I was had that in my mental notes because we haven't talked about that. I would like to know what the balance is. When we talk about parents who raise these extraordinary athletes, entertainers, multimillionaires, what does it look on the other side when they're not playing those sports or engaged in that activity that made them so successful? Was there love? Did that parent know how to turn it on and off? And I'm here to say that I've witnessed in sports and stuff like that, parents really don't know. Let me say this. Too many parents don't know how to turn it off. You know why? Because they're living through their children. You know what I'm saying? And then that video game mentality comes out. Like, we start like basing our parenting off how we play video games, because we can control the character or the player on the screen through that video game console. We try to do the same thing with little human beings. In sports, we call them Madden coaches, 2K coaches. Like, you trying to coach these kids like you playing a video game. And let's talk about the interracial elephant in the room. Let's talk about the fact that there are some people out there that are highly critical of the Serena sisters based on their romantic, you know what I'm saying, choices that they made with white men. People have even made the reach. Maybe it's not a reach. I don't know. I don't know enough, but I'm just telling you what's out there. Made the reach of the reason why they have, you know what I'm saying, sought out these relationships with white men is because their experiences with their Black father were so negative or abusive. And he was so controlling. Y'all haven't heard this?
I have not, but whoever said it, I'm gonna say that's a mother effing lie, because those women dated Black men many times before they got with their white partners. So I don't know where they got that concept from, because those women did have with Black men many times, especially Serena. So
yes, versus Tiger Woods, who also raised by a Black father who was obsessed by golf and made his little child become a golfer. No one says that about, because his dad was so, horrible towards Tiger. That's why Tiger doesn't date Black women. No, because I've never seen Tiger around a Black woman, but they don't blame his father for the choice that he made. And he's Caucasian. He's not, black
I think it's a
and
little bit indirect.
white, he's always exclusively dated white women. So they don't, and married. So why is this
It's a little
assertion
bit more
laid
indirect
at?
with Tiger.
So what now?
I see it happen with Tiger, but it's way more latent and indirect, where they blame the father for introducing him to like a country club, you know what I'm saying, life experience where he's surrounded by white people, where that would influence his romantic partners.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's interesting. I mean,
I've
that could possibly,
I've
possibly be the
heard
case.
that.
And to be fair, golf is really still more of a white man's sport if you think about it, compared to basketball or football, even tennis. Although Serena Williams and Venus is in tennis, and now we have Miss Osaka. Other than that, did they any other black people in tennis besides those three?
Oh, yeah, there are a couple from
not trying to be
France, and of
funny,
course, like before them, there was Yannick Noah, Arthur. So, but mostly, and I forgot the name of the African American woman that won the first Wimbledon before that. But yeah, there've been sprinkles of black people every now and then.
All right, yeah, I
but
don't watch
usually they're
sports
from
like that,
France.
so I wouldn't know. I don't watch sports like that, so.
Well, I remember years ago where there was a speech by Farrakhan, and he made a similar argument about OJ. He didn't really talk specifically about his parents, but just the community in which, and the culture that he was raised with, saying that, you know, this is back during the trial, you know, it's like, well, OJ didn't sell out. He got pushed out. You know what I mean? Because he's grew up around affluent white people once he got to a certain, you know, level. And that's, and from black males and females, athletes. And as a high school, you know, educator, I really do see this. I'd be like, well, there you go. We potentially lost another one, male or female. Once you start excelling in sports, you are leaving behind a tax bracket and a social economic, you know, setting that is usually diametrically opposed to the one you were raised in. So I definitely see that with males and females, but Trisha's right. You know, you don't really hear that much, you know, criticism when black men dating, you know, white women. Depends on what barbecue you go to, actually.
That imaginary barbecue that I still don't understand why people keep inviting folks to.
I think overall, if we're gonna do the tournament thing, black women collectively get more heat. But like I said, depending on, you know, you know what barbecue you go to, hey man, sisters is not playing around with brothers dating white girls. You are gonna get the business. They're gonna talk bad about you. But, you know, I think all in all, you know what I'm saying, we need to keep in mind that the majority of black men and women do date and marry themselves. I think we forget that stat somewhere in the mix. But someone asked if LeVar Ball, you know, fits that description, and if he's in the same conversation, and I say absolutely. Absolutely think that. And I really think this is an interesting conversation too, because as an athlete, that was my main sport, was tennis. That was one of my main sports. I actually played two white dominated sports in baseball and tennis, you know what I'm saying? And I played football too, but I really was really good at baseball and tennis. And I used to take, you know, lessons at Mark Frisbee Tennis Academy in Issaquah. I mean, I know how hard it is to make it in that sport. Now I'm good. I knew my senior year when I got my varsity letters, this would be the last time I'm going to be playing these sports at this level. But it took a lot of hard work if that's your metric system of success. And I wasn't willing to do that. I'd rather be a student leader. And that's what I pursued when I went to college. I was like, I'll do that. You know, I'll do that part. Let me ask you something. And I'm not trying to be petty. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I want to ask y'all a serious question. Are we really saying that you can legitimize toxic, abusive, and like unhealthy, intense behavior and parenting, as long as your end result is a successful child or an adult.
I don't
Is
think we're
that
saying that.
it kind of sounds like that's what we're saying.
No,
Not
I think that we're saying that the first question is who's saying what is toxic. So that's the first inquiry. And the second inquiry is got to be what is the threshold between pushing somebody adequately? When do you all of a sudden cross into toxic land? And then why don't Black parents get the respect of knowing their child well enough to know their limits? So for me, I played Division I baseball. As a baseball player growing up, my dad was saying, even though I was left-handed, you have to hit right-handed sometimes. Even though you're going to fail more, you're going to hit right-handed. You're going to get used to striking out. You're going to stop crying after you do that. You're going to be emotionally hurt when you're not successful. I don't care. Get used to it. Prepare for failure.
That's
Yeah.
not abusive, though.
Huh?
That's not abusive.
No, but that's the point, is that somebody on the outside is going to say, oh, man, that was really tough on you. Man, you might have hurt.
About that, that's something different. I understand what you're saying. That's different, though.
But somebody on the outside is going to comment on it. And
I think my example was more contextual.
But we let you talk, though. I'm saying that somebody on the outside is going to make a comment without the knowledge that that parent has of their child. So we're talking about Roy Jones Jr. earlier, right? And it sounds completely preposterous to put him up against someone who's 3 or 4 years older than him without his dominant hand. But his father probably watched him beat up a bunch of kids his age with his dominant hand and saw him developing bad habits because of it and said, I'm not going to let you get hurt when you meet somebody at your skill level. You're going to use that other hand. And just like Trisha was saying, kids be hard-headed. No, I'm not doing it because it works for me like this. And dad said, all right, bet. I'll set you up. You're going to have to use the other hand. You're going to learn how to move your head. Because if you don't, you're going to get hurt. And us on the outside are saying that's a terrible idea. Why would you do that? But we didn't watch him fight at 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. We didn't know what he was capable of. The father might. And so in all these examples with Black parents where they get pushed, it's always somebody who doesn't have the insider knowledge talking about whether the tests that the child received were fair. You don't know that. You're not there. Like, because with white people, if they move up their kid 3 grades and they say, you're going to take AP calculus in 5th grade, they're like, oh, Mikey is so smart. Nobody's like, you're really challenging Mikey and his brain is not developed at that rate yet. You could be damaging his confidence in academics forever. Nobody says that. And so I'm saying keep that same energy, because you got to give people credit for knowing their child. And that's the reason why I said earlier, great coaches know their athletes and they develop them for life. It doesn't sound like King Richard was over here pushing Trisha to become Serena. She was trying to make Trish the best version of Trish. And I think that in those instances where people are trying to bring the best out of you, if it makes you uncomfortable, I mean, the entire catchphrase at O'Day when I was there was get out of your comfort zone. And all we do is win there. And that's why. So I just have an issue with the idea that anytime you get past the comfort zone, it's abusive, because that's just not true.
Well said. Well said. Real quick, I want to read this comment by Taylor D. She said, no, because people can also end up battling low self-esteem, personality disorders, mood disorders, suicide, or PTSD. Success looks like a whole person, not just career and financial success. So no, there isn't a pass for such parents. And that's what I was trying to, say. It's like our metric system is still, again, their performance in that said sport.
But they're not either or situations. You can address both. Your mental health can be addressed because you're addressing the whole child, but that still doesn't mean your parents can't know you well enough in order to push you in other areas. So both can exist. It's not one or the other. And yeah, parents should, in a healthy environment, a parent will know their child well enough to know the other mental health issues that they can't address to bring them to have help with that. And I can then only speak for myself from experience. Like another thing, I've played violin since I was 3 years old, and I've met people that were like, "That's ridiculous. Why would your parents force you to play violin at 3?" And oh, my dad was a musician. My mother liked the violin. So I played, and it wasn't something that I volunteered and welcome. I just want to play the violin. But once I started to play it and I was, getting rather good at it. And by the time, I'm a teenager, I've played for over 10 years and everything. So I was advancing. I used to probably play and practice until my fingers would bleed. Other people would probably say that's ridiculous. Your parents should have stopped. But no, they were pushing me because then after a while, intrinsically, this was something I wanted to do. And it taught me about you put effort into something and then you will receive results from it. So that's something that I could take from other places. Now, later on in high school, I developed an eating disorder. Parents addressed that had nothing to do with the fact that I played violin, or there were other stressors, probably more the AP and honors thing and all of that, and being the only Black girl in the school. Those things were stressing me to the point where I developed the eating disorder. The other aspects where I was pushed, and they also pushed me in tennis and all these other things, that had nothing to do with the fact that they knew me well enough to address the mental health issue I had going on, but they were still also pushing me to do well in school and to play violin.
So what's the reckoning? Like, how do you resolve that though? How do you resolve a person when you read their tell-all book, right? Feel me? Who had these parents who did these tactics, you know what I'm saying? And then you say, and this happens quite often. Yeah, but what you didn't see is that me doing all those things, like D Taylor said, led to me having this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem, that problem. Like, how do you resolve that, knowing that had there been different choices made with those parenting, strategies, that there's a possibility that they wouldn't have these disorders and issues?
Because childhood in and of itself, when you think about it, it is a traumatic experience, and there will be traumatic things that happen to you. And I guess part of working through that, either with therapy or help, is addressing the fact that it's a traumatic experience. Your parents, particularly if they're Black parents, they were probably doing the best that they could. Doesn't absolve them if they're doing things like, sexually abusing, that kind of thing. But there's still Black people trying to live in, like, for the women, in a patriarchal system, and the men in a race, both of them in a racist society. They're still trying to do the best they can for their children, because they're also observing the fact that probably they're not receiving the best for their children or for themselves, and yet they're still trying to push you to be better. So, like, for the things that I now in 2021 can look at my parents and say they should have done something different. Okay, that's nice for me to, what is it, Monday morning quarterback? I forgot, whatever day court, to look back and say what they should have done. But I also have to look at it through a lens of what they were experiencing, that there's no playbook on how to raise children. And particularly if you're Black and descendant of slaves, then you probably don't, unless they seriously took interventions in order to become better parents by the Western definition here, then yeah, they're probably made some mistakes along the way. And yeah, just to forgive and have some grace, but also to work through that so that you can move on and not replicate those same errors for your children. But you are going to make some mistakes.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
And also about Miss D's comment, I was sitting there thinking, you can experience those things even without your parenting being an issue or stem from that. You can experience those things even as an adult, even without having nothing to do with your parent upbringing, I guess you could say. And I would also wonder for those who have, and just not to dismiss anything that they went through because that's their truth, but I do wonder, would they trade all that in to have a better set of upbringing? I do wonder when I do hear, I wonder would they trade with somebody who did not suffer that, who did not go through that type of upbringing or that type of tactic, where they changed all that fortune and fame for that.
Yeah.
I always wondered that sometimes. I wonder, would you trade that? Me and
Yeah.
probably would, because they'd be like, at the end of the day, I got this money. That not everybody thinks like that, but some people do operate on that.
And
And
even
it's so
yeah.
funny I brought about the left hand thing, because I am a left hander. My mom did try to make me a right handed person.
I don't think
But
that's
she wasn't abusive with it. She did try to make me write with my right hand, but I went back writing with my left hand. But the funny thing is, I can write with my right hand now, but only when I'm standing up writing on the wall.
Yeah, I don't think that's abusive though.
My
It's
mom
not.
said it was painful. It's literally painful
It is
to
to form your
have to do this.
hand.
So that's
It
what I
is
thought.
a
That's
thing.
abuse.
But I
Mhm.
personally did that to myself, though. I
It's
didn't do it
abuse
to
to
her.
make someone write with their non-dominant hand.
It's
My
literally
mother
contrary
said it
to
was
the
a
art.
painful experience that
Oh.
For
she
her.
even, for her, that it hurt her literally to have to do
Yes.
that.
So you
I
have
would
to find
make
a
the
form.
argument that working out is painful and uncomfortable too. I don't consider that abuse.
My man's got to pick a side.
Well, shout out to Bob.
Now we're gonna make all lefties righties.
Yeah, I'm the only left-hander on here, but yes.
Did that
No,
with my son. Listen, I did it with my youngest son. That's why I can. This resonates with me. When he played sports, there was no left hand and no right hand. There was just this hand, that hand. I'll do it with this hand. I'll do it with that hand. That is a version of it. And I would definitely, when I coached him, I would coach him specifically to use both hands. And he's ambidextrous. But I hear Geminis by birth are ambidextrous. But that's what they say. That's what they say one of the traits is for a Gemini, because they twins and everything. But
Carmel's gonna get you.
But my thing is this: I think that I would like to see, and some people would say, "Man, you're extra logic." I would like to see the same intensity, and maybe parents, if they knew better, they would do better. I would like to see the same intensity on the mental health and the mental wellness as they put on, the sports and things of that nature. And we hear that a lot with people who raise their children to be athletes, but they don't raise them to be academically inclined, like they raise them to be, athletically inclined. It's the same argument with mental health. And I think that, I think we make some good points tonight. And I just want to make sure that we're not legitimizing things that reproduce, pun intended, like destructive behaviors and self-destructive behaviors. And we have to figure out what is the end goal and what is that person's role going to be in our community. And when we don't have a sense of sovereignty and autonomy, it becomes increasingly hard for us to figure out, how can I raise this child to be a contributing member to our community, when so much of how we raise our children is not for our community, it's for the oppressor's community. So that's when it becomes really, really hard, when we have to make a decision of, like, when are we going to push the limits? When are we going to push the boundaries? And what's going to be our metric system for that? And I found a crossroads in an intersection, like with military. Like, there's so many things about the military I do not like. And there's so many things that I really appreciate and value. And I would never, ever want my children to be police officers. I have family members who are police officers, and I would never want my children to be in the military, just for the philosophy and the value system and what they do, to Black people. However, man, I was very, very happy, when my oldest son decided to do all 4 years and 3 years in ROTC. That was one of the best things for him as a person for his human development. Now, my youngest son, he did 1 year and couldn't wait to get out. Man, I'm out of here, man. But I really don't think he needed it as much as my oldest. And though I don't agree with the military, I do agree with certain principles that it teaches: discipline, hard work, respect, for your fellow human being, and that whole creed that they have to memorize, not to lie or steal or anything like that. Like, my son needed little, life reminders of that, to help me, you know, co-raise him. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, but I also knew that I wasn't willing to do the things with my children to make them those extraordinary athletes. I would always be like, so you don't want to do it? Fine, then don't do it. And that's not an option if you want to raise a Mayweather, if you want to raise a Roy Jones, a Michael Jackson, the Williams sister. That's not an option. It's not. But I didn't want to have that relationship with my children because I already knew what the end goal was. I already could see it because I was their age before they never been mine. So I already knew how this book was going to end. It would probably end with my children growing up. Now I'm speaking from my perspective. I'm not speaking from anyone else's, resenting me. And it was already bad enough that my sons just naturally are always looking at a way to physically or mentally or emotionally show that they can hang with pops. Shoot, I learned that, you know what I'm saying? When I, lost my first basketball game in one-on-one against my son, I was tired. This guy was feeling it. I learned that when I boxed my son. I sparred 3 rounds with him. This guy was tearing me up with the jabs. You know what I mean? I learned that with my daughter when we played chess, and she probably beat me like once, but out of all the times. But you know why she only beat me once? I'm not playing that girl. I'm not playing Isis in chess. Isis? Going to state when she was in elementary school, Isis for chess? I'm not playing her. I'm going to lose. I don't want that. I'm going to go ahead and tell it, man. I got an ego for a reason. I'm not trying to play her for real. So I already know that there's a natural component of raising children where they want to, and being a Black dad, I always feel like their mothers could do all the wrong in the world and they gonna still love her. But for me, I gotta play my cards right, you know. So when I get old, someone's gonna change my diaper and not resent me. And I feel like there's way too many situations where people are raising these kids and our children, pardon self, they're not goats, to be extraordinary human beings and be millionaires, and then they end up not liking their parents. And so we can say, okay, yeah, we're hard on Black parents. I agree with that. We demonize Black parents. I agree with that. People from the outside should not be telling Black parents what to do with their children when they're not faced with the unique oppression and trauma that we have to deal with. I agree with all that. However, at the same time, man, I don't want my children not to like me. I told someone, you know, when people tell me they have a problem with me, I say, man, it really doesn't bother me. When Mecca, Isis, or Askia have a problem with me, then that's when I start having a problem with someone not liking me. So, I mean, that's my end game.
I think we also, as Black parents, I think we tend to treat our kids like adults too early. That's the core to them not liking you, as well as if you're going to treat them like adults when they're little kids, and you're also going to push them to excel in different areas. That's the recipe for disaster thing. So, and that's not even if the kids are being trained to be the best in something. We especially teach. Well, I was going to say girls, but boys too. Black girls and Black boys. It's like they're born adults, even in terms of we don't explain to them how to do things, and we'll just start yelling at them, and that's not parenting. And not having patience with them as parents, and then at school they don't have patience with them, and then we wonder why they don't like their parents necessarily, and especially even when they turn 18, the threat that you get out my house when you're 18 because you're an adult, but developmentally you're not an adult. So why do we keep pushing the kids out at 18? All kinds of things. So all of those things combine, plus I would think it would really mess up their mind. Like even in a Michael Jackson situation, you're being treated like an adult and you're a little kid, and you know that everybody is surviving and making an income because of you. That's your little kid still and your development. So that has to mess up your mind, your thought process, as well as your relationship with your parents to assess how they're parenting you, because you're like, well, I'm the reason that you guys have a mortgage and a house. So why you can't talk to me like that? And you're like 10, 11 years old. So all of those things combined.
Yeah. Yeah. We've come to the point. We're at 55 minutes in. You know what time it is. It's what's the plan of action? When we talk about parenting, when we talk about celebrating parents who may have some parenting strategies we don't necessarily agree with, when we talk about the end goal of them raising successful children and successful adults who are extraordinary millionaires and historical athletes, like what's the plan of action when we are celebrating certain parenting skills, and also when we are actually utilizing these certain parenting skills to raise children? What's the plan of action? Who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go. I think the plan of action is when it comes to pushing your kids to be great. This is the part where you actually do. I do agree with what Trish said. You need to. I think Bobby said that you do need to know your kids and their limits and what they're capable of doing. Everyone is not meant to be an athlete. And I kind of had this conversation with somebody many times in my family, but I ain't gonna bring that up. But we had this conversation. Not everybody's meant to be like that, and that is okay. But I think where some children will have resentment toward their parents is when they feel they're being robbed out of being the child that they actually are. I think that's one of the biggest problems. So as much as adults, we want the balance of life and work. I think children should also have the same opportunity. So when they are working, they should also have time to play as well, which is kind of, I know it's a little off topic. That's why I never liked their homework, because I feel if I did work at school, when I'm off, I should be able to be home and live my best life. I should not be doing homework, you taking my time. So that's one thing I am bitter about. And to this day, as a 31-year-old woman, I hate homework to this day. But anyway, when it comes to raising your kids to be great, I think there needs to be a balance of being loved and then being pushed to be great. And for people on the outside, I'm going to go ahead and say it to you. Mind your business. Attend to your children. Make sure your kids are developing in the best way that you want them to be without you not being the toxic parent or being abusive parents. So yes, I for Rich, again, I have not seen the movie, but obviously it seems like Serena and Venus put him on a high pedestal in their life. I have not heard them say anything negative about him. They just show him basically who he was as a man and as a coach. So not only be a coach, but also learn to be a parent and love them.
Right.
And that's really it when it comes to that. My plan of action.
I guess I'll go second to split the ladies up. I think the first thing, she said know your child. And I would say be a participant in all facets of your child's life. I think the biggest issue I have with people getting on Richard Williams or LeVar Ball is that you will not see or hear any comments from those children about dad missing PTA meetings, about dad not being present at every single thing that they participated in. And if you're going to do that, as far as the holistic approach is concerned, the child can look back at life when they're an adult and say, wow, my dad went to work and then he came to all my stuff. Because that's what I always think about when I finish my day sometimes. I think, damn, I'm tired. And my dad went to work, never missed a day, and afterwards took me to practice and watched my practice instead of going home. Instead of going to watch his favorite TV show, he watched my practice. So was he really so bad that he had the audacity to yell at me during practice to give more effort because he was giving his time? No, that's not a bad thing. No, that's a trade-off. That was the blessing. And at the time, of course, it didn't make me feel good. But there's a lot of stuff in life that you're not going to feel good about that isn't a negative thing or doesn't have a negative impact. So if you want to raise kids that are going to be soft and think everything's going to be, butterflies all the time, that's fine, but at least be present. And if you want to make that decision, I think, Logic, the best thing you said tonight was you have made a philosophical decision that you were not going to be at odds with your children.
that's completely fine. But you need to make that decision as a parent, because you're not going to be able to do it both ways. You're not going to be able to slip and slide between, I'm going to be the parent that doesn't care if my kid that doesn't like me, and I'm going to be their best friend. Because I can tell you right now, my dad told me very early on, I don't care if you don't like me. And that's how he parented me. And I didn't like him for a long time. But I grew to respect him because he was still doing every single thing he was supposed to do as a father. And I had no choice but to say, I am the luckiest person in the room at all times when it comes to dad, because he's always there. And he's in my ass, but that's because he's here. And I actually got these kids that are looking for their dad at practice, looking for their dad at the game. I wonder if he's here, and I want to be upset because he's yelling. Nah, like, respect the time, respect the effort. So kids, give your parents some grace, and parents, be participants in your children's lives in all facets.
Hey, Bobby, because my mom said every time, I ain't your friend, I never was. That's what I
said to my children too, because that's what my mama told me. My mom said, I'm the adult, you are the child.
I'm like, I don't drink with my kids. We're in our 30s and 40s. I ain't drinking with y'all. Y'all my kid. I don't do that. No, y'all gotta go to another room.
Go ahead.
My mom's too. My mom's too was, I would be pretty pathetic if I needed to have you in order to make a friend for me. Like, I went through 9 months of carrying a friend, and I got to wait to talk to you. You're not my friend. But we should first, of course, every parent should get to know their child in order to offer the best possible supports or investment in time to develop their gifts. And so it's really based on the child. Get to know them. If you're going to try and make them the best in the world at something, because statistically, obviously, there's a very slim chance statistically, but it's great that you're investing in your child because you believe in them. Also balance that with some physical contact in terms of love. So making sure you're hugging them, still talking to them, because otherwise all they'll hear from you is the hammer. You need to be perfect, do this, and that can negatively impact your relationship. Allow your children to be children developmentally, particularly as Black people, because we tend not to do that. Also ensure that you have a community to help you raise your child. So making sure that they're able to interact with the family you are born into or the family you create, so that they can have, positive interactions with others. Because too often when we do see people being developed to be the best in the world at something, those spaces become wider and wider as you ascend. So somehow prepare them mentally for the fact that their world, the higher up they go, is going to be wider and wider, particularly if you're choosing certain sports, or even in terms of certain academic pursuits, it will become wider. So prepare them for that reality so that they don't sacrifice themselves in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that. Hold on a second. Yeah, that's a good one. That was a good talk right there. That was a word. My plan of action would be, take the best parts of everyone's parenting. You know what I'm saying? That you study. Take the best part. Don't take the worst part. If you know something ain't working generations before you, then why continue to do it? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if whooping your child, putting hands on them ain't working, just because your parents did it to you doesn't justify, the strategy. It doesn't. You know what I'm saying? Or, because your parents, pushed you to do certain things that you didn't like or didn't want to do, and doesn't mean that it justifies you doing it to your children. because you turned out well. Don't think just because you turned out well and you turned out good that everything that was done in a parental strategy was justified, because your parents weren't the only people that were raising you. Your parents weren't the only people that had something to do with your development. And the reason why I know that, I know some children who have very, very, very toxic, unhealthy parents, but they find the support from the school. They find the support from their coaches, their teachers, and other people's parents. So just because you turned out good might not be because what your parents were doing to you was all that great. So take the best parts. Bobby's putting something in the comments behind my back. But anyways, it's C Talk. I want everyone to have a really good Thanksgiving or holidays or whatever you celebrate, Thanksgiving, whatever you do tomorrow. I really trust that you spend time with family and work on your value system, and heal, man, heal, because these last couple of years and stuff have been rough with the pandemic. And whatever you're doing tomorrow, whether you're fasting, whether you're praying, whether you're eating, whether you're not, whether you're spending time by yourself, or with family, that you have a peaceful, pleasant day. Like, you're at peace with wherever you're at. We have to remember, man, that the holiday season for a lot of people is not a good time. Some people lost some people in the pandemic, and this is the first time that they have to experience the holiday season without those loved ones. So we got to be careful talking about happy holidays or what you're doing for this and assuming that people are actually going to be happy during this time. Some people are just trying to be at peace at where they're at. So I want y'all to be at peace, during this holiday season. All right. Love y'all. C Talk. We would love to have some more people, on C Talk. Diversify, If you want to do a C Talk with me, go ahead and inbox me, and we can hook it up. We're always looking to talk about new things, So we out. Love y'all. Peace.